Life is a precondition for enjoyment of any human right. In that regard, the right to life guaranteed by Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights is the most fundamental right of all. To ensure that individuals effectively enjoy the right to life, Article 2 of the Convention creates obligation for states to refrain from actions that may cause a loss of life, but also to take the necessary actions to protect and save lives. Despite that, people die every day as a result of domestic violence, extensive use of force by police, use of armed drones in foreign operations, to name a few. In cases of enforced disappearances or death, other than from natural causes, a state has a duty to investigate such cases, whether caused by state agents or private persons. The state has an obligation to launch an investigation, even if family members do not request so. Over the years, the European Court of Human Rights has established a set of standards that clarify what constitutes an effective investigation. While the local prosecution has the right to choose the form and procedure according to national laws, the Strasbourg Court requires that any investigation must be independent, adequate and effective, prompt and expeditious, and sufficiently public, and allow the participation of the next of kin. So first, what constitutes an independent investigation? The fundamental aspect here is that the investigator has to be independent from the suspect who may be responsible for the death or disappearance. There is no abstract guide to determine when an investigation is independent enough. This will be determined by looking at the circumstances of each case. But for illustration, if a police officer is a suspect and his main colleague is conducting the investigation, that would fail the test of independence. The second requirement concerns the adequacy and effectiveness of investigation. A state must show that it has done everything possible to determine the cause and circumstances of the death or disappearance, to determine whether the use of force that led to a killing of a person was justified under Article 2 of the Convention, and lastly, to identify and punish the perpetrator. In cases of contract killing, for example, the investigation would fail the adequacy test if they go only after the hitman and not also after the one who commissioned the crime. Now, this does not mean that a state must always find the perpetrator. There are many unresolved and mysterious cases of murder. The Strasbourg Court has explained that this is an obligation of means and not of result. So what matters here is that a state demonstrate that it has taken all reasonable steps to secure the evidence concerning the incident, including eyewitness testimony, forensic evidence, and where appropriate, an autopsy that shows clinical findings of the death cause. The third requirement concerns the promptness and expeditious investigation. Article 2 of the Convention obliges states to promptly investigate cases concerning the lethal use of force. For example, if state authorities knew of a murder, it shouldn't take hours or days to go to the crime scene. Article 2 also requires that investigation proceeds with reasonable expedition. The court has found violations of Article 2 in cases where judicial inquiries began 13 years after the killing of a person allegedly by security forces in Northern Ireland. The last requirement concerns the public scrutiny and participation of the next of kin. Investigation materials may contain sensitive and confidential information that cannot be shared with the public. However, the Strasbourg Court requires that state authorities keep the public informed about its work and results. Article 2 guarantees a particular involvement of family members. As a minimum, the investigation must provide victims' relatives with an official report analyzing the circumstances of disappearance or death, and keep them informed and involved in the investigation and prosecution stage. Also, in some cases, the prosecution must provide legal aid to victims' relatives to ensure their effective participation. These 4 standards of investigation are essential guiding points, but be aware, the Strasbourg Court may require specific steps to be taken by the investigative authorities in some specific cases. For example, in case of a murder of a journalist, the prosecution must check a possible connection of the crime to the professional activity of the journalist. In case of racially motivated crimes, domestic authorities must pursue investigation with particular vigor and impartiality so that it maintains the confidence of minorities in public institutions. Now, you have acquired an important knowledge of the standards of investigation under Article 2 of the Convention. This should allow you to better understand and critically examine the Strasbourg Court's jurisprudence concerning the right to life.